Hey everybody, how's it going? It's your old buddy, your old pal Art. I'm coming to you live from beautiful Austin, Texas. We're actually in the courtyard of my apartment complex here off of Riverside Drive, not too far from downtown Austin. So I hope everyone's doing well. Been keeping in touch with many friends online and through Messenger, and as I said, I hope you all are doing well. So today is June 10th, 2020, and I realized that it was 6 years ago this week when I realized that it's been 6 years ago this week that I got my on-air break on the radio in Philadelphia for 102.9 WMGK. It's a classic rock station. It's been a station for many, many years in Philadelphia. It was Magic 103 when I was a child. It was like soft rock, like Barry Manilow and Christopher Cross, and all that kind of stuff. And then sometime I think in the 90s it changed to a more of I don't know if I'd say an oldie station, but it was veering its way towards classic rock. And then probably by like the mid-late 90s, it was like total classic rock, because we had a station in Philly. It was 94 WYSP, and they were the classic rock station. There's another station that's been there forever, which is a sister station of MGK, because they're under the same corporate umbrella. 93.3 WMMR. They were always like, they've been around for I think like over 50 years, that station, and maybe 53 years. They were they were like the progressive station back in the day, and then over time they became a combination of like of harder rock, like just rock, and then he threw in some classic rock, so it was like a mix. And now they're like they're like heavy rock. They probably I'm sure they still play some classic rock. In fact, I'm sure they do, but they became more of a heavy station, rock-oriented station. And then 94 was a classic rock station, and then they became a sports station eventually. So 102.9 MGK picked up the slack on that, and now they're the premier classic rock station in Philadelphia and South Jersey, Delaware. They call it the Delaware Valley over there. So I was working there. Well, I think I'd been working there for a year already. I was a remote producer, and I'm going to get into the history about that. I've discussed it a few times on my podcast, and I'm sure here I've written about it on Facebook and maybe talked about it. But for those who don't know, I'll go into it. I had a dream to be on the radio when I was a young man. I loved Howard Stern. I didn't want to be Howard Stern, but I just thought, the world of radio. I mean, even before Howard Stern, I thought, the world of radio was like so cool, and there was like this mystique, and it's like, how do you get into this business and everything? And I was a shy kid, so I wasn't, I had that Howard Stern thing where it was like, how are you gonna talk? How you want to be on a radio? You gotta have a personality. So, but I had the dream. I didn't pursue it. I just didn't have the confidence, and I was veering into an artistic direction. So I thought, well, I'm gonna take, I'm gonna use my artistic talent, and try to make a living off of that, which I did. I went to art school and became, majored in graphic design, worked for, as a graphic designer, many companies. I mean, the only music-oriented history I had as a graphic designer is I worked for Electric Factory Concerts, which was a very large independent concert agency on the East Coast. They were like the Bill Graham Presents of the East Coast, basically. So Larry Magid and Alan Spivak started that promotion in the late 60s. And in the late 90s, I was a graphic designer for that company. I designed a lot of handbills and posters for all the gigs. I got I had to go to the venues and dress the venues with the posters and all that shit. And that was really cool and stuff. And then, but that was the only music-oriented thing, that I was in. I got to do some music-related stuff when I worked at like the Philly Weekly, for some ads, with that in mind. But I still had that dream. And then I remember doing a podcast with my friends Casey Trowbridge and Ewan Taylor, and Alan Lee and Mark Danger and Rick Gillespie. We did this podcast, wrestling podcast in the early 2000s, which was a blast. And so that was like my first taste of like podcasting, and it was just like fun, like we didn't like take it too seriously, like we didn't take ourselves seriously. So, but that was in 2007, 2008. So I was still, had that bug for broadcasting, and I was like, I didn't know, how to go about it. So hold on a second here, folks. It's like 90 degrees here today, which isn't bad considering it was 100 yesterday. So there's actually a nice breeze in the shade here. I have a ton of trees here, which is nice. So we go to 2012. Actually, it was like late 2011. I was listening to sports radio a lot. I was listening to tons of sports radio, like at that time, like in the late 2000s, before the 20 and into the 2010s. And I remember hearing this ad for this broadcasting school. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, and across the bridge in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, there was this broadcast school called Connecticut School of Broadcasting. They have like campuses all up and down the East Coast, and I did like a lot of research on it. I heard commercials about them. There was a guy named Harry Mays who was one of the radio hosts. He had graduated from that school and got a job at the Fanatic, which is a sports station, one of the sports stations in Philly. And I remember being like, wow, this is a cool story. This is a guy, like, I can relate to this guy. Like, he had another job, he listened to radio, he wanted to get into it, he thought he could do it, so he went to broadcast school and graduated and got a gig. So I thought, well, I don't know how easy that could be for me, but I thought, shit, I spent like maybe 2 months listening to these commercials and testimonies. And then, like, when I really started thinking about pursuing this and being serious about it, I remember reading lots of reviews. I went online and read reviews, and some people were like, oh, it's a scam, or oh, I didn't get a gig, or they just take your money. And other people were like, I've been a cameraman for 20 years at this local station that I live nearby in my town, or and I remember seeing like similar reviews of the art school I went to. I graduated from art school with a graphic design degree, and I got jobs, and everything. I made a living for like 18 years, and I'd see reviews from the art school that I attended, and same thing. People would be like, I got a job, and other people would be like, it's a scam, they just take your money. And but I did a lot of research, and I read these reviews, and I really bounced it around in my head. So in January 2012, I went on this studio tour. I remember calling up the school and saying, hey, I heard you guys on the radio. I'd like to come in for a studio tour. And they're like, oh, well, there's one on Saturday. Come on, Saturday morning, come in. I'm like, all right, cool. So I go to this studio tour. There's like 30 guys in this class room, like all for this studio tour. And it was like, I was part of the percentage too. Like 90% of us wanted to do sports radio. That's what we were like all like pursuing. We're like, oh, I want to do sports radio. We all been listening to WIP. We all been listening to the Fanatic, and we're like, I was like heavily into sports. I mean, I still love sports, but that was like my super like kind of analytical period where I was like learning and really like, understanding, the games and everything and such. So I remember going on this studio tour. And like, they talk to you about, they talk to you about, the criteria and getting into the business. And it was hosted by Harry Mays, actually. That's why I went too, because it was hosted by Harry Mays. And I was like, I want to meet this guy too, because, he's a little older than me, but like I said, similar story. It's like, I'm in this job that I don't like anymore, and I want to pursue my dream. And, I was like 39 or something when I was pursuing this. So I'm like, for me personally, this was like the window of time was like slowly creeping down, and I was like, man, I'm like, God, like, can I get this in my 40s? I still I try not to have that age thing, but when you're pursuing, business, I mean, especially like when you feel like a lot of businesses want like young. I mean, you assume they want like young, hungry talent stuff, but then you also realize they're cool with hiring somebody who is older, mature, has been around the block a few times, knows the deal, and is not, is going to be maybe a bit more humble and understanding of the process of things of getting to where you need to get to. So I went on a tour. They heard testimonies, met Harry. We did like an audition where you had to like read. They give you like a live read, and you have to like read. Like when you hear the DJs, like you hear it all the time when you listen to radio, like when they're like, hey, this week at HEB, get specials on ground beef. It was something like that. I had to read off the thing, and I remember reading it. I remember doing like the first time run on the audition, and I knew I was kind of stammering and nervous. And I remember like looking at Harry. Harry's like conducting this audition, and he's like, oh, you want to do that again? And I'm like, yeah, because I was like, oh man, I fucked up, But he was like, no, he's like, do it again. So I did it again, and then I made like some little crack at the end, and like after the read, and he like was like, oh, this is a good one, So, and then then he talked to the president of the campus, who's Tom DeFranco there in Cherry Hill. He's a really awesome dude, and he talks to you about. He encourages you. He's like, I think you should pursue this, and sometimes people would be like, oh, I think this guy's going to say this to everybody because, he's going to give this spiel because he wants your money. But I really felt that they really want people who are like dead ass serious about it. I'm like, yeah, they're going to collect your money, but they don't want their time wasted either. They want people who are really going to want to pursue, something in the media arts, whether it's, video producing or broadcasting and, with radio or what have you, or even with internet, of course, with podcasting and video blogs and everything, or vlogs and all that stuff. So I remember talking to my mom about this, and I was like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, I just have to tell her. And I knew I was almost going to get this reaction. And it was basically like, are you crazy? Like, you want to do this? Like, you just want to switch careers? Like, you just want to like up and leave your career you've had set in place for all this time and go pursue this unknown territory? And plus plus the tuition is like $12,000 for like it's like a 4-month course or something. So, and I was like, yeah, I'm like, I want to do this. I'm like, I'm serious. I'm like, I've wanted to do this for a long time. I went on the studio tour, I'm like, I feel I could do this. I feel I could learn this, and she was like reluctant. And then my stepfather, Cornelius, he was alive at the time. So she was like, go talk to him and see what he says. And one thing I always remembered about my stepfather was like, he was always encouraging about changing careers. He even told me like in the middle of like my tenure as a graphic designer, he was like, hey, you don't have to, you could switch careers. Because it had happened to him. He'd been laid off from like he'd worked for like, I can't remember if it was Philips or what electronic company he was working at, but he'd gotten laid off. And then, he got rehired eventually at another company, and he had to like relearn things and kind of take a new position. Like, still was making good money, but so he knew from experience. And I think in general, he just had that like, he had that just that sentiment, that idea of like, hey, you could, change your path, your career. You don't always have to do this. And I remember he even said that to me like when I started going into graphic design, and I was thinking like, man, you're telling me this as I'm starting a career? But no, he was a really intelligent man and like foreseeing things. And so I think he was sick at the time. And I remember going to see him, and I said Case, his nickname, his Case was short for Cornelius. I said, Case, I was like, I have this crazy idea. I'm like, I want to go back to school for broadcasting. Like, it's going to cost this, it's going to cost money, whatever, but I was like, I've always wanted to do this, and I feel like I could do this. And he was like, yeah. He's like, I've always told you, you can change your career. He's like, I highly, endorse this decision. I recommend it. Go do it. This is what you wanted. One of the saddest things for me is that he passed on before he could ever hear me on the radio. But he was the catalyst because to get me going. Because I went to my mom and I said, Case, encouraged me. He said, "Go for it." So she was like, "All right." She's like, "We're gonna have to figure out the finances on this, you know." And luckily I got a $2,000 scholarship because I wish I saved my essay, but I wrote an essay because you could qualify for it. So I got a $2,000 scholarship. My Aunt Nancy helped me with the registration fee because the classes were like March and July, and I remember it was like my mom at the time. My mom was like, "Oh well, we might have to wait till July, because we're saving up." I basically had to take out all my money from my life insurance and pay a majority of it with that, and then my mom, I think, probably helped me with the rest, and then my Aunt Nancy helped me with the registration fee. And if she didn't do that, I wouldn't have been able to get in March. And like the timing worked out well because because I wanted it done as soon as possible. I wanted to get in as soon as I can and get this going. I was like, oh fuck, I gotta wait 3 more months for this. So, but no, I was able to get in March. I got in right in time for the March classes, and graduated in July. I graduated in July, and then in August of that year, one of the administrative folks, I'm sorry, I don't remember your position. Was it vice assistant president? I'm sorry, but Brian Fishman, Fish. He was one of the instructors, and he was also one of the administration staff members, and he was very encouraging. He was all like, we both like metal, we both we're like similar age and stuff. He's got like a great radio voice, great charisma and personality for radio, and he did like voiceover. He did like a lot of voiceovers. He did like radio IDs for a lot of stations, like not locally, like I think around the world and such. Like he had like things going on. So he was very encouraging with me, and I remember in August he said, "Hey," he's like, "Do you like 102.9 MGK?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a cool station." He's like, "How do you like to intern there?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." He was like, "All right." He's like, "Send me your resume and I'll send it out to them." So he sent out the resume, and I got a call from the producer for the morning show. The morning show is run by John DeBella, who's been in Philadelphia radio for 40 years at this point. When I was there, he was celebrating his 30th anniversary. He does the morning show. He had this group called the Morning Zoo. They do all like sorts of like crazy, funny bits and stuff, and they were like very, very popular in Philadelphia. And then for years he'd been at 102.9 MGK doing the morning show, and they needed an intern, so I sent in my resume. It was sent in. Get a call from their producer, Rob Calvert. He's like, "Oh, come on in for an interview." I was like, "All right." So I dressed up in like slacks, a button-down shirt, had a tie. It was like, oh, this is a microphone call. It was like, and I went in for the interview, and I ended up getting it. So for like for like 3 months or so, I was interning. I had to be there at 5 a.m. And John's already there at like 3:30 or 4, like doing research because he lived like way outside of Philly. And so I'd come in, I'd help assist with I would there was this cart that like had like his radio log and like markers and notepad and just all sorts of stuff, and just other supplies like headphones. It was just like stuff for him and like from some of the other staff, but I think it was mostly for John. Head in, I'd have to do some like prep stuff, probably plug in the headphones, and it was for the most part, like I remember I was in the studio observing, but there were days where I had to do things like when a guest came in, I had to meet the guest at the elevator, bring them in, bring them into the green room, get them whatever they wanted, coffee, soda, some kind of, or a snack, some kind of, anything, and then I would like lead them out of the studio to the elevator. They used to have a thing. They have this thing called First Friday, where they let like 12 or 13 listeners into the studio, and they get to sit there and they get to see the show, how it goes about. There's audience participation, and I had to like conduct all sorts of things with that, with the listeners, and so there were days where I had to like really do work, and like, but for the most part, like a lot of it was like, I'd observe, I'd ask questions, I would just like see like the whole process of radio shows. I would after the show went from like 6 to 9 a.m. So like after the show, like sometimes they would do call-in interviews where like they would have a musician or a celebrity call in, they do a phone interview, and then it's edited down, and then it's like aired like the next day or within a few days or whatever. So that was cool to sit like listen to a whole bunch of interviews. I met some cool people. I met Don Felder from the Eagles, the guy who wrote Hotel California. I met Stephen Lynch. He's funny as hell. I met Sebastian Maniscalco, I think his name. He was a really, really nice guy, and that dude cracks me up. Craig Gass was cool. He was like, good luck with your career, I met the dudes from Get the Let Out. They're a really cool Philly-based Led Zeppelin tribute band. I met Bernie Perrant, the goalie, the legendary goalie from the Philadelphia Flyers. Won back-to-back Stanley Cups in '74 and '75. He was like, "Oh, you want to see a championship ring?" And he shows me this like big fucking ring. And he was a great guy. I mean, I always hear like cool things about him. I met Darren Dalton. I met the radio guys and stuff, Preston and Steve. So it was a great time. And then and then I remember my internship was up in like the end of December 2012. And I go to producer Rob and I say, hey, I'm wondering if there's any gigs in this place that I can pursue. And he's like, go talk to Nancy Palumbo. She's the assistant programming director and music director for WMGK. And I remember going to her office and I asked her, hey, I'm in, my internship with the DeBella show is up, and I was wondering if there's any jobs that I can apply for here or anything. And at the time she was like, no, there isn't anything right now, or there just isn't anything. And I was just like, oh fuck. I'm like, all right. So I was like, man, I'm back to square one. So I was like, well, I have this internship under my belt, it was like 3.5 months or whatever. So I was like, I just started applying at like local radio stations. I think I even applied at the sports station upstairs, the Fanatic, which is a sister station with MGK and MMR and Ben FM. They're all under the same company umbrella. So I remember going up there, and I can't remember the guy's name. Like, he was a producer, and he did like a night segment, like around like 6 or 7 or whatever. And I remember he was like telling me how well they really they hire from within. And I remember he told me to just listen to a lot of sports radio and understand the format, which was fun. Which I really wanted to tell him that I listened to sports radio 24/7 and was very familiar with the format and such. But I just remember thinking at the time, like, ugh, like, you already told me that you hire from within, and you're talking to me like like literally walking off the street. Like, I just came from upstairs, and I got resume in hand, so. But whatever, like, it all worked out because about a few weeks later, so it's like so now it's January 2013, and I got a call from I can't remember if I talked to Brian. I can't remember if I talked to Fishman before this or after, but I remember Rob calling me, producer Rob from the DeBella show. I remember him calling me and being like, I think Fish probably told me something about it. I think he said that, or I think he may have asked me, or that if I wanted to, if I'd want to, you know, do the internship again, and I was like, hell yeah. And then producer Rob called me, and he's like, you want to come back and intern? And I was like, yeah, I got nothing going on. He goes, good. He's like, because we need you. He's like, come in Monday. This was like, I think this was like a Thursday or Friday the week before. So he's like, come in Monday. And I'm like, I'll see it, because when I left, they still had a first Friday, I think, or something, and they had some stuff going on, and I wasn't around, so they're scrambling around, like Rob's got a lot going on in his plate, and he's got to do all this other stuff, and it all builds up, like when it's just, when you don't have that extra hand around. So I came in, and I interned for like 7 months or whatever. It was, or 8 months. It was from my internship was done in May, and like, and the month before, in April of 2013, I had actually made my on-air debut. They'd put me in a skit online. It was really funny, but it was cool that they got me on the air for that. So it was probably around that time. It was like about a month before, like it was like a month before my internship, and it was like the end of April, I guess, or like towards the end of April. And I remember going to Rob, and I asked him, I'm like, hey man, I'm like, I want to see this thing about ask about if there's jobs available here, and he was like, he's like, yeah, he's like, I think they're, he's like, go talk to Nancy again. So I went back to Nancy Palumbo, and I told her, I said, my internship's coming up, it's going to be ending next month. And I was like, want to know if there's any gigs here, that are any jobs that I can pursue, or here, because I want to get into radio. And it just so happened that their remote producer was going to be going on vacation for a couple weeks in June, and they needed coverage. So she asked me if I would be interested in doing that, and I said, yeah. I'm like, I definitely want to do that. I want to learn a technical aspect, before I would ever go on the air, as a talent. I'm like, I want to know how the boards work and everything, and I want to get that knowledge, in me, to have that extra edge with my broadcast knowledge. So she's like, all right. She's like, come in these days, because the remote producer, his name is Bob Stye. He had remote shifts coming up, so she was like, okay, come in on these days. They were like Fridays, because that's when the remotes were. They were like either Friday afternoons, or they would be like evenings. But I think I went in. I think I went in for. Oh, wait a second. There was someone before. There was someone before Bob. There was a woman named, I think her name was Kristen, and she had done board operating work for them, and she may have shown me stuff. But anyway, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So, but she was like, she's like, yeah, come in for these shifts. You'll sit in with our board operator, and they'll show you, how things go about. And I remember like one night I sat in with this woman, and like she was doing a remote, and I did like one break. I brought my future colleague Ray Koo back on the air, and he was like, all right, you're gonna do this, okay. It's like, it was so funny, but it was cool, like sitting in and like seeing the process, seeing that process and stuff. But yeah, Nancy was like, yeah, come, you'll come in on these dates, and you'll ghost, you'll watch how it's done. So I remember going back to Rob, and he's like, she mentioned something about a remote producing job. And we had a producer in the show named Joe Eunice. Like he sat like towards the back of the studio, and like he had his own computer with a playlist, and he was like, he was leading, telling when the breaks were, or like John would tell him switch this song out or switch the, whatever, and like he'd inform him when the break's coming up and all this kind of thing, or when we're coming back on air, when we're off air. And he was a really, really great guy. Like we talked already before, and Joe's very, very, very encouraging. So I remember, I think Rob was like, well, he's like, you have 8 weeks left. He's like, sit there behind Joe and just like watch him, how he does it. You can ask him questions. And I remember doing that, and I would say, like when I'm not needed for like other tasks, like screening phone calls or taking information for phone calls and stuff, and other things. So I remember sitting behind Joe saying, oh man, I hope, I'm going to be asking you some questions. I'll try not to do it, interrupt your workflow. And he's like, no. He's like, ask me questions, like ask as much as you want, like. So I would take notes. I'd ask him questions and stuff. I had a book that I was jotting notes in and stuff. So yeah, I was really feeling it, with this place, because like I was already feeling good as an intern at this place, because this place didn't treat you like an intern, that was what I liked about it. Like they like really treated me like part of the staff, like I bumped into other staff members and stuff, and one of my favorite people at the station who I first met was Debbie Calton. She's a longtime DJ, especially in Philadelphia. She retired a couple years ago. She's awesome. I love her so much. She was always encouraging with me. She was always like rooting for me and stuff. She defended me a couple times, and I would always see her in the crossover. When I did shifts. Well, I'll talk about that later on. But like Debbie's a gem. I love her so much, and she's not only a great radio personality, but just a great person. Just really pleasant, really really wonderful, and she was so cool to have around and see, like in the mornings and stuff. So the next 8 weeks, I was taking notes, and then I think I came in like this one night, like I said, when this woman Kristen was or Christine, maybe it's Christine, I think her name is Christine actually. I sat in on like one thing with her, and then one shift with her, and then I sat in with the shifts with the guy I mentioned before, Bob Stye, he was their like resident remote producer. So I sat in with him, and he was doing the afternoon remotes for Andre Gardner, another radio, staple and well-known personality, long-time personality in Philadelphia, and just in general, he's he's been, and a little trivia fact: Andre and I attended the same school district, just two different high schools, but we were both from the Linden Peace School District in South Jersey, so. So like I would like watch Bob do the producing, and I'd take notes and I'd watch, and then slowly he would have me do a break here. All right, there we go. Sorry folks, hey, what's up, Daniel? I'm sorry guys, I'm not there's a ton of comments here I haven't gone through, but thanks for joining me here, everybody who's here. And yeah, I'm just, like I said, I'm just going over if you're just joining in now, I'm just going over my, my radio history, because it was 6 years ago this week that I was given the opportunity to be on the air in Philadelphia on 102.9 WMGK. So anyway, I was, Bob was giving me chances to bring Andre in and out of break, so he would he would have me do one break, then the next week he'd have me do two breaks, and it just progressed because I came in there were a lot of remotes at that time, and every time I was coming in, I think I came in for 5 shifts to train, and then this one day I came in and Bob's like, so how you feeling about this? And I'm like, yeah, I feel good about it. He's like, do you feel confident? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, today you're going to produce the show. He's like, but don't worry, I'm right here. So if anything happens, I'm here to help fix, whatever, or answer questions. I'm like, all right, cool. So from what I remember, that shift where I did the whole, where I did all the producing, it went well. I don't remember any. There might have been one thing that happened. If anything had happened, like Bob was there and it was like a quick fix, or he answered the question really quick. So on I think it was on June 3rd, 2013 was when I was officially hired as an employee of Greater Media Philadelphia to work for 102.9 WMGK, and I think the following week was when I did my shift. And at the time, that was it. I was a fill-in. I was the fill-in guy. I was the fill-in remote producer. So, that's the only gig I had at the time. And I don't know, like somewhere along the line, there's a radio. Like I said, there's a sister station upstairs in the building. This is the old layout. They have a new layout now. So when I say upstairs, I think all the stations are on the same floor right at this moment. If I recall correctly. But when I lived there, I felt like I lived there in a good way. But when I worked there, MGK was at the bottom, and then MMR, the Fanatic, and Ben FM were all upstairs on the same floor. So, I had an instructor at Connecticut School of Broadcasting named Rich DeSisto. He did a lot of like the radio. He did the radio classes. Like putting together IDs and bumpers, and like putting production pieces together and everything. So he helped us with that, and he's also the assistant program director at Ben FM. He may still be. I'm not sure. I know he does on air. He's been doing on air at MGK as well for years now. But he was the assistant program director, and a friend of mine, James, had also gone to CSB, and I remember him telling me that, Rich hired him on to do production work, remote work or whatever for the station. So kind of the same thing happened to me. I remember I remember Rich called me or contacted me and was like, hey, you're doing the remote stuff, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, we could use you upstairs for Ben FM remotes, because Ben FM, they had a DJ in the morning, and then they were like automated for the rest of the day. Like there was no talent in the studio. It was just like ran. The program just ran by itself. Sometimes they had remotes. They were starting to do remotes because they were doing like appearances, at certain spots, or they had this concert called the Summer Bender, so they would do of course live remote from there. So I would produce that kind of stuff. They did, so Rich was giving me some opportunities there as well. So and then I started getting more producing opportunities in MGK, because Bob's wife was having a baby, so he went on leave for like a while. So then I filled in that role, and all of a sudden now I'm the primary remote producer. And he got gigs everywhere. Bob's a radio lifer, so he was getting gigs elsewhere and stuff too. But he was happy, and I appreciate. He's another person whom I appreciate so much. Bob, trained me. He's super cool dude. Great to work with. And I remember I'd get panicky, and he'd be like, "No, it's don't worry, don't panic." He was good to if I panicked or was like, "Oh no," he was cool to just put that emotional fire out or whatever. So I was doing, I started doing a lot of remotes. I was doing them for Andre, with his he has this thing called Hometown. It was a Hometown show or whatever. Basically he would broadcast from a different bar a different bar slash restaurant from like a lot of local towns. You know, I remember actually being on a day off and he was in South Philly, and I like got to join him. I don't even know if he was either the day off or maybe I might have been. I guess it was a day off, or I don't know if I wasn't. I mean, I was still working there. It was just like happened to be a day I wasn't doing it, but yeah, you know, I was starting to do that for him. I was starting to do remotes for Ray Koob, who's the nighttime DJ there. You know, another longtime radio personality in Philadelphia. You know, great fucking guy. You know, like Andre and Ray were like the best dudes ever to work with when I was doing remotes. They were so cool. You know, like just very patient. You know, like very easy to work with. I remember when I was like still getting my feet wet as a producer, and I'd be like, I think we have to do this, and they were like, okay, you know, if you say so, you're the producer. And then when I got enough confidence to say like, we need to do this, or we need to switch this, or we need to take this out, they're like, okay, like they trusted me, you know, they totally trusted me, you know, to make calls, to make audibles, to be like, I need to take a song out, or I need to or we need to switch a segment, or you missed, you know, the last, you know, liner, we need to put this liner in, or whatever, you know, or we have this contest coming up, you know. And they were like, you know, I say, you know, thank you Andre and thank you Ray, like, you know, it was so awesome like working with you guys, you know, like you made it super comfortable for like, you know, someone like me who was like, you know, still trying to figure things out, or like, you know, wondering if I belonged here sometimes. No, they were great, like, you know, and you know, that the whole staff at Greater Media was just tremendous. It's the Greater Media is the greatest company I ever worked for. It really was. It was really just this tremendous. You know, I really felt the unity. I really felt like the family thing. You know, I'm sure there was like drama stuff that went on. I never was encased in it or anything. And you know, everybody was always cool with me, and everyone was very trustworthy of me. You know, they trusted me with like. They trusted me to man the ship, you know, 50,000 watt station, you know, like reaching out so many places and then online worldwide, you know, and you know, for me to like, you know, build up the skills and the trust, you know, for them to be like, okay, they're like, oh, Art's got the keys, cool, you know. It was just great to have that feeling, because these are all radio lifers, these are all radio veterans, man. They were all worked in other stations in Philly and around the country and around the area. And here I just graduated, you know, like a year or so before, and then I'm coming in. But you know, I remembered a lot of stuff from school, and you know, and I was really into learning stuff, you know, and I really retained that information, and the process was easy. I mean, it was just, you know, once I had my rhythm down, man, like people would come in and watch me and just be like, "Oh, you're so quick," or "You're really tight on the brakes and stuff," and you know, you just learn it, you know, you have to know it, you know. I mean, my first program director, Charlie Lake, you know, he was a great guy. He was very patient with me, you know, but I mean, I remember my first day, like, being late. I was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes late. I think Andre, I think it was definitely your shift. It might have been my first shift with you, and like, we were running late on something, and, you know, you might have been talking to some of the patrons a bit, and like, we probably went a few minutes over, and I remember Charlie coming and going, all right, buddy, come on, we got to get this on time. And I was like, I know, I'm trying. I'm like, Andre was talking to you know, I guess, you know, Andre was talking to some people at the bar or whatever. He brought him on the air, like the owner and stuff, and so that was always funny. But like, you know, Charlie was cool, but he, you know, he ran a tight ship. But it was great because it taught me to be like super fucking tight on the brakes. I'd be like, you know, like sometimes like, you know, I'd even be amazed how tight I'd get, you know, the brakes, you know, like going, especially like learning from like the first time when I'd I mean, I wouldn't like let it go too much, but you know, I just had that thing where I was like, boom, like I could just, you know, take them right off the air and go right to the next piece of programming and such. So, yeah, you know, like I said, I was treated very well there. You know, I had a lot of respect there. I had a lot of trust. You know, and then, you know, it was great to be in that, you know, that group. You know, to be part of that historic group of people who worked in the industry for so many years. You know, and you know, and they were you know, very, very, very cool with me. You know, and I always remember that. So you know, it was. It was really awesome, you know. And then Bill Weston became the program director. He was the program director for WMMR, which I think he still is, and then he became program director for MGK. And Bill was awesome, you know. Bill's an awesome guy. Like he's super just super great dude, you know, very trustworthy, you know. He was like, you know what you're doing, so, you know, go do it, you know, like, and he was very encouraging, you know. Like, I remember there were times he'd bring me, I'd talk to him in the office, and we'd have good chats. And, you know, one time he like gave me breathing and, you know, breathing exercises so I can relax myself, because, you know, from when I was doing on air and stuff and everything. But yeah, so I was hired in June 2013, and then a year later, June 2014 was when Nancy came in. I remember there's like this little there's this little jock lounge. It's like little like office that you just chill out in and whatever. It's got like a couch and a desk and this table and stuff. And there's like photos of like musicians and some of the staff in there. And I'm like in there. I was coming in for like one of my remote shifts, and whatchamacall, I was just sitting in there. I was coming like an hour or so before my shift, so I'm like sitting there just chilling, just unwinding, getting my mindset ready for 5 hours of production and everything, live production. And Nancy comes in, and she basically was like, you know, how would you like to be do on air? And I was like, yeah. I was like, yes, I do. I want to do on air. So she's like, all right. She's like, you're going to do Sunday nights from 8 to 10. And then you're going to run Little Steven's Underground Garage from 10 to midnight. And she's like, and you're starting this Sunday. Or you know, you're starting on to Sunday. I'm sorry. You're starting on, it was the 22nd. She's like, you're going to start on the 22nd, because she had to shift around the schedule and everything. And like, she was like, don't say anything yet. She's like, I still have to shift, you know. She's like, I have to shift the schedule around and whatever. So, and then, you know, then we'll make the announcement. So I just remember sitting there just being like, whew, like, oh man. It was an interesting emotion to have, because I just got, you know, the gig of a lifetime that I've been waiting for my whole life. And at the same time, I have to prepare to produce, you know, an Andre shift, which I was not nervous about, of course. I mean, doing an Andre shift was like, you know, I know the back of my hand, you know, like, but having that emotion and being like, oh man, like, you know, wow, like, I'm going to be on the air, like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, this is happening, you know. So I definitely told my wife at the time, Hannah. I told like a close knit of people, and I probably said, don't say anything, you know, because I can't, you know, I'm not supposed to know about this yet. It's not official, you know. It's official, but it's not officially announced. So, you know. And so yeah, so then I think a week before, it was probably around this time, you know, it was like a week before I was going on air. Nancy sent out a company email that you know, with the new schedule, and that I was going to be on the Sunday night, you know, I was going to be on a Sunday night lineup. And so I remember like texting her, and I was like, hey, I'm like, can I announce this on Facebook now? And she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. You know, we made the official announcement. So then I went on Facebook and I said, hey, I'm gonna, you know, I got my break, I'm gonna be on air starting next week every Sunday night, 8 to 10, check me out. You know, and it was joyous, it was amazing. Everybody was just like, holy shit, you know, like, you know, like for the people that were like, you know, I didn't have too many discouragers, but, you know, I'm sure there were people that were like, oh, you know, he's going for this, like, you know, I mean, he might make it, you know, I mean, the odds are this slim, you know, I mean, you're going into this, you know, I really was 41 years old, starting a new career, you know, like, I really was like, okay, like, I'm starting over at 40, you know, I'm rejuvenating, you know, like, I still, you know, it was a gig once a week. and the producing was a few times a month. I mean, actually, it was more than a few times a month. It would pick up like pretty good, especially in the summer, because we did a lot of remotes at concerts and stuff. So, I mean, it was steady, but I mean, I still needed some other income to replenish, that bit of income from MGK, from the radio job. So I still had to do graphic design, but I remember thinking like, okay, I'm going to do this until I can really pursue this as a full-time thing. Because like I said, I was doing well. I was producing for MGK, I was producing for Ben, and then I had the on-air, I had the on-air gig. So, so that at least was going steady, even if but I still needed income. So I was doing graphic design still. And, but yeah, it was awesome. It was an awesome time. I mean, I do listen back on some of my, air checks, and, some of them are a bit embarrassing. Like I talked very fast. I think it was like nerves, it was like, I just want to get this done and over with kind of thing. And, I did a crossover with the Sunday afternoon DJ, T. Morgan, who, again, another local Philadelphia radio legend, created the format of classic rock, actually. He's got a great book, autobiography, that I bought from him, that I read that I've read, and he's a great guy, another great guy, and he's very, very encouraging. I remember he would tell me, like, I think it was like the second week I was doing it, he came in, he was like, yeah, I heard you on the way home. He's like, slow down. He's like, don't talk so fast. He's like, take your time, get it out. He's like, make like you're talking to your audience, like to your listeners. So he gave me a lot of great pointers and stuff, and he really helped me out a lot with my development as a DJ. And I was it was a great time to be part of that staff, and I was doing doing all my producing and stuff, and I'd go and then Connecticut School of Broadcasting, or CSB as I'll refer to them from here on out. They do these studio tours, and they would have like the one I went on years before, and they would have they'd have staff who they had staff who had graduated and were in the industry to come back and lead the group. So I did that plenty of times. They'd be like, hey, they're like, can you do a can you do a can you do a studio tour? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I come in at like, they're always like at 7 p.m. They go from like 7 to 9, and it was cool to like tell my story, and I really enjoyed like doing like the live read auditions, and I would really like I'd really try to give the best advice I would. I would be like, because I was there, and then here I am like doing like live reads now on radio, and I'm like, listen, I'm like, you listen to radio, I'm like, you're familiar with radio, like how, like the way you hear those guys do the live read, that's how you have to do it. Like, don't pretend, don't act like you're just reading the words off. It's like you have to put inflection or personality. You have to act like you like this product so much, or this event so much, or whatever it is. You have to sound like you're so much behind it that people are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to get that, whatever. I'm going to get that, I'm going to get that vacuum cleaner, or I'm going to go to that event, or I'm going to drink this type of drink or whatever. So it was cool to give that kind of advice, to people and stuff. And the CSB, like those guys are just so awesome. Tom DeFranco, Brian Fish, Dan Fritz, Katie Walsh, Rich DeSisto, like you guys like were all fucking great. Like I love you guys. You really helped me get to where I wanted to be and needed to be, in radio, and you're always encouraging. Especially Fish, can't thank you enough. Like you really, got me to that bridge. He really helped out and stuff. And I appreciated your demo critiques and everything, and all that kind of stuff, and your feedback. So, and like I said, with Rich, like he was a great instructor, and then gave me a break at Ben, and Dan Fritz, he was a great teacher with TV production, and gave me I got an internship with him. In fact, that was my first internship ever. I was doing camera work for the sporting events at University of Pennsylvania, which Dan runs the sports network there. So kudos to you, man. Like I enjoyed doing the soccer games and wrestling and lacrosse, and gymnastics, and it was just cool, like being a part of that crew and hauling the equipment around and putting things together, and doing the broadcasting and such. It was so cool. Katie, Jeff Crass, Bob Salter, like all you guys, like all you guys there, man. Like just really, really, really thankful, for you guys and for what you did to help me get to radio, and and with radio, John DeBella and Rob Calvert, and Tony Harris, Sean Burke, Nancy Palumbo, Bill Weston, Debbie Calton, Andre Gardner, Ray Koob, all you guys, folks, people in the sales staff, Tony at the front desk, like everybody, just everybody was just so, I'm very just appreciative of how everybody treated me, and how the interaction was, at that company and at that station. And I left. I remember. Beasley Media bought out Greater Media, I think, like 2 years later, in 2016. And one of the first things they did was cut staff. They laid off people, and they obliterated the weekend staff, on-air staff. So luckily, I still had a job there as a producer, as a remote producer, studio producer. But my on-air stint had been done like pretty much like 2 years, exactly 2 years later. And the only thing I'm bummed about that, is that the last 6 months prior to that, like I really felt like I was getting comfortable and in a groove, and I felt like I was starting to get pacing, and I felt like, I'm a late bloomer, but I started to feel like I was starting to get like, okay, like I'm not talking like the Roadrunner speed. And I was getting listeners calling in. I had some regular listeners. I had this guy from I think he was from Kentucky, an older gentleman who would call in like on Sunday nights. And other people would call in and call for requests. I had a guy call in. He wanted to hear something. Oh, you always play Don't Stop Believin'. I want to hear something from the First Journey record. And I'm like, well, yeah, I want to hear something from King Crimson too, but I don't think I could play that either on the air. So, but there are all sorts of like crazy stories, like that I could remember. Like, I mean, nothing like too crazy. I think the craziest day that I ever had there was when Paul McCartney was in town. I'm trying to think, like, what year was it? 2015 maybe. There was like one year that McCartney played in Philly, and for those who don't know, Andre Gardner to say he's a huge Beatles fan is an understatement. Like the guy, he sweats and bleeds the Beatles. Like he just like he does Breakfast with the Beatles. Which used to air in Arizona. I think it airs somewhere on the West Coast in Arizona, and then it airs on MGK on Sunday mornings. And I remember we did a live Breakfast with the Beatles, and that went really cool actually. Like, I remember it went so well that I remember like Nancy, texting me, or emailing me, like, great job with that, live Breakfast with the Beatles, because we'd never done it before, and like we've done Andre remotes, but they do a Breakfast with the Beatles, like a live 2-hour, remote, like that was, like, whoa. But that went well. But this one year, McCartney came to town, and like Andre, I remember they had the engineers. Oh, I forgot, like the engineers, like Betsy Deming. Like, oh, she was an awesome engineer. She was so fucking helpful. Like, I love her. She's great. And like her like, and and the other engineers, or maybe it was her, like they set up the board, they set up the control board, so like I could record interviews later, because Andre was going to interview, like he interviewed the guitarist for McCartney, and I forget whom else he interviewed, but these were supposed to be recorded and then play. I was going to record them as he was doing them while program was playing, and then I would air them later. But then I come in, everything's all set up ready. They're like, oh, everything's set up. You're cool. You don't have to touch a thing except the record button. I'm like, cool. And Andre gets on the horn. He's like, hey, I want to do these interviews live on the air. And I'm like, I don't know how to configure that, and I have to contact the engineers because they set it up in this way. I think Tony tried to help me. Did Tony try to help me? I feel like Tony Harris tried to help me. Someone else tried to configure that in a way, but it didn't work because it was already configured to what it was supposed to be, what the plan was. And I working in that industry, like I understand like things are going to be changing on the fly. Call an audible. And other times I've been able to handle the audibles, but this time I was like, oh no, like we tried. I remember we tried to do it. Like he was like, well, just just record, and you know what happened? What happened was I think we tried to do it, and like while he was on the air, like the music, there was something happened where like it cross-pollinated with like other programming. I don't remember how, and I wish I could explain better, but it was years ago, and I just kind of tried to forget that day. Like things went well. I remember he wanted me to play this Wings song or this McCartney song. And the only version I found, and it was somehow a Paul Stanley version or something. Like Paul Stanley, I guess it was from his solo album or whatever, from the 70s when he was in Kiss. I don't remember, but like, I remember like, I should have just told Andre, I don't have the song. But like, I probably couldn't get in touch with him, and I probably should have just played something else. But I went ahead and played this song. And it was so weird. I don't even know if Andre noticed, but guess who noticed? Bill noticed, because I remember coming in like days later for another remoter shift, and Bill and I were talking about it, and I was like, Bill, I'm like, I did the best I could, man. It was a crazy shift. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I thought it was quite interesting to hear a Paul Stanley cover of a Paul McCartney song on the station. Well, now I'm going to pay Paul Stanley's publishing company or whoever published or whatever. Well, maybe it was still the Beatles, but I don't know, maybe Paul Stanley gets a cut of it still. Oh, that was crazy. And then, there was this time I was, they had the car show at the Philadelphia Convention Center, and we had one of the afternoon DJs. I can't remember his name, and I feel bad because he was a good dude too. He did like weekend afternoons and stuff. Scott Carr, yeah, Scott Carr. Yeah, he did, because I did Italian Market remotes with him too, but he was doing he was down at the car show, and we're doing a remote, and at the same time it's Beatles A to Z weekend. And I was like, I remember coming in and who's the DJ that came in? Is it Kathy Wagner? Is that her name? Oh man, I might be drawing a blank or like messing up her name a bit, but I remember coming in and she was like, hey, yeah, we're 20 minutes behind. And I'm like, 20 minutes behind? I'm like, the fuck? She's like, yeah, I don't know, like, and I think I was starting to, industry trade secret. I think I deleted a couple songs to make time, because that's what you had to do. Like, if you needed to make time, if you were going to be 5 minutes behind at the end of a shift, you cut out the last song. So there's that 5 minutes, so now everything gets back in time. So I was doing that, and I remember talking to Scott on the horn, like in between breaks, and even he was like, man, he's like, this is crazy that we're doing a remote on a theme weekend. I'm like, I know. I'm like, I don't think I'd ever had that before, where it was like, we're doing like deep cuts weekend, and we're doing a remote from, if we did, I didn't work those remotes, but this is the first remote I did where it was like there was a theme weekend going on, so it was like a big clash, like right there. And I was trying to make time. I remember Nancy. Oh, that's what happened, because Nancy texted me and she was like, hey, you're quite behind there. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do? She's like, just start taking out some songs. Like, take out songs, whatever you can, so you can make the time. And I'm like, okay. And then it would work for a while, and then somehow we'd be 5-10 minutes behind again. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, the ID's coming in. ID has to be at the top of the hour. If it's a minute over, okay. If it's 2 minutes over, anything a little more than that, you're just like, If it gets to the 5-minute mark, you're just like, oh fuck, like. And that's when I would be like, that's when I would already go to the end of that hour's block of music and be like, I'm taking out Aqualung, or whatever the song is at the end, so I can already be on time and shit. I'd like be on the horn with whomever. Like, Ray, Andre, I got to take this song out. They're like, all right, do whatever. And I'm like, just so you know, we're coming out at this song, So then my remote shifts over for the car show, and like T Morgan comes in. I'm like, T, I don't know what to do. I'm like, we're so far behind. We've been behind all day. I've been trying to take out songs, but he's like, oh. It's like he just like rolled up his sleeves. Don't worry, I got this. I was like, all right, cool. And it all worked out. He got it back on time. I had to come back that night for my night shift. So it was like too many hours behind. Like I couldn't just stick around the station. Plus it's Sunday, and it's like super boring in Bala Cynwyd on Sundays unless you're going to go to a Target or something. So or Joe's Crab Shack or whatever. So I think that was the craziest thing. And for my last shift ever, which ended up being, I think, December. It was like a week or so before Christmas. And my last shift ever ended up being with Andre. And it was a classic rock show, I guess the Montgomery Mall or something. And apparently the part of the mall they were in was like super like brick mortar, like thick foundation. And I remember Andre being like, "There's no." We're like, he had to go out. He had to go upstairs and go out into the parking lot of the mall to be like, so he can get a signal and be like, "Hey, we have no signal down where we are, where our equipment is." And I was like, "Huh." I'm like, well. So what we did was I just had to. I think. Oh well, and we couldn't record. We couldn't connect, so we couldn't even record with him in there. So. He had this app, like a talking like a you have your voice recorder on your iPhone, but then you can also like get like I guess voice recorder apps that would like make you sound really, not like you're talking on your phone, like it would like be a good quality. So basically, and Andre, this is 6 years later, so it's a great story, right? So. Oh no, it's 4 years later. I'm sorry, this is 4 years later. This is or almost 4 years, over 3.5 years later. So it's a funny story to tell now. But basically, he recorded all of his breaks on his phone, and then he emailed me the MP3. I'd have to download it off my company email, right into a folder. We had a separate computer that had Full Cut Pro. Is it Full Cut? I guess Full Cut was the thing. It was we had an editing program and like the little editing box with like fast forward buttons and like a little disc so you can like slide up and down the track and do your cutting and pasting or cutting up and editing. So like about like 40 minutes before his break, I would he would send me his break. I'd edit it. I'd make sure he was coming out of the correct song according to the log, or going back into the correct song going into the log. Everything was set. And yeah, that's how we did the show. The last show that I did with him was all pre-recorded on tape because we had no signal, and I guess because it's not like very close to the station. I guess no one had gone out there because usually people go out to they go out there, usually they go out and test the venues and they'll see like how the connection is. Is there a good T1 connection and all that stuff? And So, hey, Willie, it's great to know. Thanks for joining in, man. I haven't talked to you in a long time. I send my love to all the family up there in New England. So, whatchamacall. Yeah, so that was my last shift there. And then, like, because I was already prepping to move to Austin from Philadelphia. My move time was my move time was whatchamacall, February 2017. So I gave my notice at the company. I think I said first week of January 2017 will be my last week, depending on what the scheduling is. And then nothing came up after that because it was Christmas. I'd already done like a 12-hour I did a 12-hour marathon, 12 phone-a-thon, whatever, for Ben FM. Like they were doing like a holiday charity thing for like with the Salvation Army or somebody like downtown. So, and it was 12 hours. So somebody did the first 6 hours, and I did the last 6 hours. I did from 12 to 6. So that was kind of hectic, but a good hectic. That was fun. I remember there was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he had to like every like hour or so he had to like read like a liner about like you can donate now if you're not down, if you're not in Center City at our remote location, or whatever, wherever we were, is like you can donate through this, and he'd give like the information, like phone number, website, and everything. And I remember, like, it was like the last 5 or 10 minutes of that shift, and I usually knew where to find this guy. He'd be like right like nearby and stuff, because he'd be like, "Oh, you need to get so and so. We'll call him Ken. Oh, you need to get Ken. He needs to read the liner again." I'm like, "All right." It's like the last 5-10 minutes before the show's about to end, and I don't remember if it was scheduled. It probably was, but they were like, "Hey, we need you to get Ken one more time." I'm like, fuck. I'm like, "Yeah, Willie, take care, man. Thanks for stopping in." And I just remember being like, "Oh my God, I gotta find Ken. I only have so much time left." I like run right out the door, and he's walking like down the hallway, just. I'm like, "Ken, I need you in here right now for one more read." And he was like, "Okay, cool." And it was like the timing was just like impeccable. It was like, I just remember being like, "Oh man, I might have to like run around the office. I only have 5 minutes to do this before we go back on air," whatever it was. Might have been even sooner, but man, I was like, shit. I was like stressing, and then luckily I found him, so I was able to do the final liner for that broadcast. So, but yeah, I had a lot of great times in radio. Didn't get to pursue it down here in Austin. I was going to, and I didn't. I took time off. I tried to get back into it last year. There's a volunteer station here called Co-op, KOOP, within 91.7. And I went to a station meeting months ago. Like, oh man, like many months ago. Like I think I went in like August. Like last August I went, because this is before I got hired at my job downtown in Austin. But yeah, and the whole thing is like they do a lot of like appearances and stuff, like remote broadcasts and appearances at like different events and venues, and they say that if you want to get training time, you have to spend at least 1.5 hours of volunteer time, like helping out with getting their events together and stuff. And once you do that, then then they'll bring you into the studio, and then you'll get training time, and then you get on a show, or you come up with a show or whatever kind of thing. And I wasn't able to make a lot of events because I was working on days when I had events. I was working part-time, but the events that they had were on days, on nights I worked. And then I got full-time, and then it was really like hard to like make those events because they're all at night, and my work is at night, so I hadn't been able to do it. And then when the whole pandemic happened, so then of course they had people recording shows at home, and then sending it in, but then I can't do that because I hadn't volunteered for any events. And they're not doing events because there's no events going on, or at least we won't be starting up until maybe next month or August down here in Austin. So, maybe some point I'll try to pursue it. It's a bare bones operation. I mean, I've applied at like regular stations down here. I applied for like a classic rock station. I applied for like a pop station. I applied for like another rock station, and I hadn't heard from them, and there's really no way to contact them. And if you reapply, they'll say you replied already. So, that's how that goes. So that's why I started my podcast, which I have to get back to this week. And if I do radio again, cool. If I don't, I'm happy and proud with what I accomplished in Philadelphia. To have the dream, and then all of a sudden you're working and on air on a top 5 radio station, like a top 5 or so market in the country, media wise and stuff. So this is pretty badass, and I'm proud of myself, and I'm thankful for everybody whom I mentioned, and a lot of other people who helped me along the way get there, and people I've interacted with. I miss my fellow classmates from that CSB, from that March 2012 night class. Shout out to y'all. Keep in touch with you still on Facebook. So we're all doing our own things now. So but I'm happy that I got to accomplish it. So I said, even if it never happened, if it doesn't happen again, if I feel I don't want to have to do it again, I just remember my time doing it all those years ago, and it was really fabulous time in my life, and career-wise and stuff. And so that's like I said, that's 6 years ago. I was hired to do on air, and 4 years ago I left the company to move down, and I was on way, since I was moving down here. So, but I wasn't. I wasn't. If I wasn't moving, I would have stayed there, and just probably still had the gigs I had and maintained it until, I worked just enough for them to be like, okay, we'll give you another night, or we'll give you this shift, or, what have you. So, thanks again, folks, for joining me, for listening to this story, and I appreciate you. And like I said, I appreciate all the people whom I mentioned. From CSB and from MGK and from Greater Media. Hope you all enjoy your day and your week. And take care.